Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up show time with Liverpool once again looking to bounce back from a disappointing 1-1 draw and a disappointing knock to their title hopes. This time round, the stage is set at Anfield. This time round, the opposition is Bournemouth rather than West Ham. And this time round, of course, the gap at the top has been reduced to absolutely zilch. Null point. Man City are now technically, for now at least, level on points with Liverpool and ahead on goal difference. And obviously, they've got a game in hand, so do not lose your minds. No one go crazy. We've still got, well, no, they haven't got a game in hand. We've got a game in hand. They've played one extra. So, provided we get a decent result this weekend and against Manchester United in our next Premier League game, we should see ourselves back into that 3-point gap at the top of the Premier League. But that is, of course, an absolutely massive if, because the pressure is now on. After Man City drew level last night, it is now going to really start to show whether or not Liverpool can handle the heat of the title race. And I think this will certainly be an interesting game at the weekend, because I've maintained over the last two matches in my post-match reaction videos that I don't think this is a matter of nervousness. I don't think Liverpool are losing their heads. I don't think they're wobbling. I don't think the pressure is getting to them. I think it's simply a matter of we're just not in form at the moment. We're just not playing very well. And, you know, hopefully that is the case, because the pressure's only going to start to mount between now and the end of the season. And it's something I said to someone on Twitter: if the players are feeling pressure now, if they're starting to wobble already in February, and they're starting to wobble when they were in a pretty solid position as well, where there wasn't really any pressure on them in the first place, then there is no way they're going to get through the title race. And I highly doubt Jurgen Klopp, a manager who has been through title races and won them before in Germany, will allow it to get to his players as easily as that. So I don't think it's a case of the pressure getting to the players. However, if we do perform badly this weekend, and it's not just in the fact we perform badly, it does come down to how we perform as well. But if we do drop points again, if we do let Man City gain even more ground in the title race, then that would be the point where I'd start to think maybe this isn't just form, it's not just a blip in performances, it is actually a matter of the players struggling to cope with the demands being put on them and the pressure being put on them because of the title race. So it is an absolutely fascinating matchup this weekend. Obviously, it's not all plain sailing for Man City, because they've got to play Chelsea as well, albeit at the Etihad, so there's a bit of an advantage there as opposed to when they lost to them at Stamford Bridge earlier on the season. But if Liverpool can get a win, bearing in mind this is one of the few times we will be playing before Manchester City, then that is definitely a huge opportunity to actually put a little bit of pressure back on them and see how they cope with it, because I'll be honest, I think our players will be coping with it absolutely fine. So an absolutely fantastic game to look forward to this weekend. And when it comes to team news, I've finally got some good news for you guys to enjoy. It seems like we've had a month of nothing more than player after player going out injured, everyone's rehabilitation and their comebacks being put off and delayed, you know, thinking, oh, he's back in training, he'll be back this week, and then suddenly player X suffers yet another knock that knocks them out for another few weeks. It seems like it was just never going to end, but finally players are starting to come back. Trent Alexander-Arnold has finally returned to full training after the knock that kept him out after the knock that he picked up against Brighton. So that is obviously a huge boost with the defensive problems that Liverpool have been suffering over the last few games. Jordan Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum are a double boost in midfield. Both of them missed out, and I think were sorely missed in the game against West Ham. You could tell we had to slightly alter our setup and our formation to accommodate. We didn't have them. Our style just completely changed. We weren't capable of doing the things we know this Liverpool team can do at its absolute best. So they will both be absolutely massive, and both of them have returned to training today as well. Dejan Lovren, unfortunately, doesn't look like he's going to make it back for this game. Fingers crossed he does for Bayern Munich, because otherwise we're going to be playing Fabinho at centre-back in that game, with the situations with Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk's suspension as well. But for now, at least, it looks like Dejan Lovren is not going to be available for this game. However, all of this is subject to Jurgen Klopp's press conference tomorrow. While, you know, Henderson, Gini and Trent have all made it back into training, it's entirely possible that Klopp will look at the way they've rehabilitated from the injuries and say maybe just rest them for the weekend. I think it's highly unlikely that all of them will be left out. I think given how we performed against West Ham and how we struggled in terms of the fringe players coming in and not being able to step up to the plate, I reckon that Jurgen Klopp will try to get at least two of those three players in. But if one of them is ever so slightly off the pace, then it is entirely possible that they won't play in this game. So as for how I think we're actually going to line up, I think obviously Alisson Becker in goal, no arguments, no questions there. The centre-back pairing, I think almost definitely has to be Joel Matip and Virgil van Dijk. We don't really have have any other options there, and it is, like I said, looking highly unlikely that Dejan Lovren will be back fit, although, you know, even if he is available for this game, I think don't rush him back. I've said before that I would quite like to see Dejan Lovren replace Joel Matip in the centre of defence, but I think with him, if he does come back from injury, it will be a very, very late call, so it wouldn't really make sense to start him in this game. The left back, obviously, Andrew Robertson, and then the right back, I think it looks like it's finally going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold, which is a massive, massive boost for Liverpool. We've really struggled with defending over the last few games, and it has all come down that right-hand side. You know, the Milner-Matip or Henderson-Matip combination has been targeted by every single team that's played against us over the last 3 games as a weakness, and they have all exploited it very, very well. So I'm excited to see Trent back and see how he gets on. Hopefully, he flies straight back into the side rather than needing a little bit of time to readjust back to the pace of Premier League football. Sorry. Midfield pairing then is, I think, going to be Gini Van Aldum and Fabinho. I think obviously there are shouts for Jordan Henderson. I think Fabinho definitely has to keep his place because he's a very, very solid player, and we saw, I think it was Leicester, he came on against them for the last 20 minutes and we just completely changed. We looked like a different side once he came on, so I think he definitely has to play in this game. I'd go with Gini Van Aldum to partner him over Jordan Henderson, partially because of the decisions I've made further forward in the pitch, and I'll come on to those later, so I won't explain it just yet. But ahead of them, I think we go with the 4-2-3-1. We saw the return of the 4-3-3 against West Ham, and I'd say largely negative results. I think that formation only really works really well in the kind of Champions League games against the big sides. In a match like this, I'm not really a huge fan of it. I think we should go with the 4-2-3-1. So I think you go with Firmino down the middle, back where he's actually been playing better recently. You know, since he moved to the number 10, there's been a little transitional period, kind of similar to what happened with Mane last season, where he had to adapt to that kind of wing 10 role where he was expected to cut inside and drop deep a little bit more. It was around this time last season that Mane started to find form as well, and coincidentally, or perhaps not, he is starting to find form this season as well at this time in the campaign. So I think Firmino, he's been playing well in the number 10, so I'd like to see him play there rather than in the kind of false 9 centre forward role that he played against West Ham. Then on the right, I'm going to go with Sadio Mane, because on the left, I reckon we might actually play Naby Keita, and that is why I want to play Gini Van Aldum over Henderson, because he's just got a little bit more about him going forward. And I think if you're playing Keita over Shaqiri, you're going to be asking slightly more of that midfield double pivot to contribute something in terms of the attack and be a little bit more creative and actually provide an extra body going forward into the last third of the pitch. And I just think it is definitely a toss-up between Naby Keita and Xherdan Shaqiri over who plays. I'm going with Keita, partially because Shaqiri hasn't been great recently, and his best performances over probably the last couple of months have been off the bench as that kind of super sub where we slightly alter the way we're playing and he really influences games in those kind of situations. And also, Naby Keita has been a very mixed bag so far this season, and I think we definitely saw the absolute best and the absolute worst of him in a Liverpool shirt so far on Monday night. So I want to see more of Keita. I want to see what he can do, whether he can kick on from what he did well against West Ham, or whether he's still going to be held back by the errors and mistakes that he made during that game. Again, it's the 4-2-3-1, so it's not his ideal position, but it can always switch to a 4-3-3 if things aren't going well, and we can slightly adapt to maybe shift Firmino out to the left, keep Mane on the right and Mohamed Salah down the middle, or something like that. And that is, of course, the final player that I think will make up Liverpool's starting 11. Obviously, it is Mohamed Salah. So taking a little look at Bournemouth. Let's roll with it. They've been on an interesting run of form lately. They do seem to occupy a kind of similar space to like the Leicesters and West Hams of this league, where they very much operate on 5-game cycles. They'll have a really good spell, then a pretty poor spell, then a solid spell, then a spell where they just like have a huge problem like defending or set pieces or whatever, and then they go back to having a really good spell. And at times they look like they're going to break into the top 7 of the league. At other times they look like they're getting sucked down into mid-table mediocrity. In the end, they'll probably finish around about 9th. But the interesting thing is, it's very difficult to pinpoint where exactly Bournemouth are at the moment, because going off of their last result, they do look like they're entering into a slump. They were very, very poor against Cardiff. I think defensively, they just got undone so incredibly easily. They didn't look like they were threatening any kind of defensive solidity whatsoever. Going forward at the other end, they were all right. They just didn't really finish the chances. I think on another day, they maybe would have got at least one goal in that game and would have made more of a game of it. But as a result, it ended up being one of their poorest performances of the season. And like I said, that would suggest that they are in a poor run of form at the moment, and that would obviously benefit us. However, only a few days before that, they absolutely hammered Chelsea 4-0, and I think the scoreline wasn't necessarily reflective of the performances from both sides, because Chelsea definitely had chances. They probably created about as many chances as Cardiff did against Bournemouth. The one problem was Cardiff finished their chances. Chelsea just didn't. I think they had so many opportunities where their players would just send it straight at the goalkeeper. So I would be surprised if Liverpool don't create chances against Bournemouth this weekend. You know, they've never been a park the bus side anyway. One of the things that I noticed against Chelsea was even when they had loads of men back, even when they got like 8 men behind the ball and 6 of them in the box or something like that, Chelsea was still creating chances in pretty decent areas. So I don't think it's breaking them down, which is going to be a problem, which is obviously a huge positive, because the problem we've had over the last couple of games isn't just breaking down low defences, it's looking like we're going to break them down in the first place. It's playing with any sort of conviction that looks like we're going to start to build up a move that will actually threaten a low block, and that's why I think Bournemouth's performance is ever so slightly immaterial to whether or not Liverpool get a result here, because it's so much more about how we approach the game, how we perform, and whether or not we react to the performances we put in against West Ham and Leicester, or we just continue this kind of slump that we're in at the moment. Obviously, with it being Bournemouth, we have got to be incredibly careful about how they play on the counter. There are certain players in that side that if you leave unchecked, like Chelsea did, they will punish you no matter what. I'm thinking of players like Stanislas, like Josh King specifically, who has been on a pretty solid run of form lately and scored, I think, 2 goals against Chelsea, 2 of the crucial goals, the first one and the third one. So there are certain players that we will definitely have to watch out for and make sure that they don't create anything on the counter-attack. But when it comes to player eligibility and injuries, we have received yet another boost for this game because, of course, Callum Wilson is unlikely to return from the injury that's been keeping him out. David Brooks, who was fantastic against Chelsea, is also unavailable for this game, which is a positive for Liverpool, and Nathaniel Klein is also unavailable due to the terms of him still being technically on loan from Liverpool. So they will be ever so slightly depleted, which is a positive. However, they did manage to beat Chelsea 4-0 without Callum Wilson, so that suggests that the other players are more than capable of stepping up to the plate. It's going to be interesting because I reckon it's quite likely that Dom Solanke may not start, but will certainly play some sort of role in this game. He started against Cardiff in a sort of, I think it was either a 4-4-1-1 or a 4-2-3-1 that Bournemouth were playing, so it's likely that he will play some sort of role in this game, and obviously I think Eddie Howe will want him to play because he will come out with an absolutely massive point to prove. So something to watch out for there. He also brings an extra dimension to their play if they want to go long, if they want to aim for a target man rather than play silky counter-attacking football, then Dom Solanke will definitely give them that option. We know that while it didn't work out for him at Liverpool, there's still definitely a footballer in there. He's still a more than capable player who can cut it in the Premier League, so we've definitely got to watch out for that one. But I think, of course, like I said, it all comes down not to how Bournemouth play necessarily, but whether or not Liverpool can banish the demons of the last couple of games and show that we are here to stay in this title race, and Man City have got a much bigger fight than they thought they were going to have to put up with. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, as always, hit the like button down below, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon with the post-match content after we've hopefully beaten Bournemouth on Saturday. Until then, bye for now.